Please welcome Governor Bill Ritter Jr., President and Chair of the Board for North America at Climate Group.
Thanks. Thank you for coming. Good morning. Welcome to Day 2 of Climate Week's New York City's Hub Live. It's a pleasure to see you back, and thank you again just for attending. After the incredible voices and insights that we heard yesterday, it's clear that the push for a cleaner, stronger economy is not just talk. It's real, and it's picking up speed. Of course, this comes with tough choices. Where should we place our bets? How do we balance short-term gains with long-term value? And how do we make sure those who move first and move fast capture the sustainable advantage? Over this plenary today, leaders from business, government, and civil society will share what's working, what's next, and how ambition and collaboration can turn opportunity into results. As we've seen, the new clean economy isn't a distant vision. It's happening now. And the choices we make today matter at every level. Leading from the ground up is Premier David Eby of British Columbia. He's a leader who understands the path to prosperity runs through clean energy. And he's showing that climate leadership isn't just national. For the most part, it's local. That's something we share also, he and I, as a former governor. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming the opening keynote speaker for this flagship session, Premier David Eby of British Columbia.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here in New York with you for Climate Week. I'm joining you here from British Columbia. For those of you that aren't familiar, we're the westernmost province in Canada, just above Washington State and just below Alaska. My apologies for those of you that are very familiar with our province. I've got about 5 minutes to speak with you about what we're doing in British Columbia, and if you take just one thing away, it's that we believe climate change is real. That we have a responsibility as government to support British Columbians in addressing it, and that our province has a responsibility that goes beyond our borders to address climate change. But today, my remarks are really going to focus on our local efforts in British Columbia. There's an American saying, all politics is local, and for British Columbians, climate change is very local. I would say that our province has disproportionately seen the impacts of climate change. We had we've invented whole new vocabulary to describe what we're seeing in the province. We had a heat dome event that killed 600 people in our province a few years ago. We had something that we called an atmospheric river that washed out major highways and flooded farmland. We have had pine beetle, which is an invasive species, be able to overwinter in our forests and decimate our forest sector, which then fed into some of the most epic forest fire seasons we've seen. We used to have a fire service that was seasonal to fight forest fires. They now go all year round. We have something called zombie fires that overwinter underneath the snow. I didn't know that was possible. I learned about that recently. And so in the spring, when the snow melts, everything's so dry, they spring up again. So this is what we're seeing in our home province, and it is really driving home for British Columbians the realities of the threat we face and what we're going to be dealing with for many years to come. And it's very clear to me that it's up to us as elected officials and those who lead companies and who are involved in organizing communities to work together to address this very serious challenge that we face. We're not waiting around to hopefully that some new technology will come along to remove all the carbon and we'll be fine. British Columbia has been working at this issue for some time. In 2016, we had about 5,000 electric cars, zero-emission vehicles on the road. Currently, we have more than 210,000. We put in place a system of incentives and subsidies to support that transition, including charge points all along our highways. That resulted in us being 1 and 2 with California for electric car adoption in North America, and certainly by a long shot, #1 in Canada. One of the reasons why we've been successful in this is one of our big advantages in British Columbia. We have access to clean, cheap electricity. We have a number of legacy hydroelectric dams, but also a newer dam that act as big batteries for us to be able to deploy wind and solar more effectively. We're doubling down on that. We've done 2 calls for power. We have $32 billion in investment going into expanding our electrical grid right now to expand that advantage. Because of our electrical advantage, we have the lowest carbon products produced anywhere in the world, whether you're talking about metals and minerals, agricultural products, energy products of all kinds. We have the lowest carbon products that the world needs. And so the $36 billion investment is about additional transmission lines, wind and solar projects, and we have a call out now for firm power, which could be geothermal, tidal, some wind resources, or hydroelectric, or others. And so if you're in the electrical sector, please have a look at BC Hydro. While sustainable electricity producers are being chased out of other jurisdictions, we are welcoming them with open arms in British Columbia. We're also supporting British Columbians as well, because one of the things that we've seen in our jurisdiction is that when affordability is threatened for people, climate action tends to be one of the first things to go. We had a very lively debate about a consumer carbon tax in our province over the last election and nationally. And so we've made sure that we have resources to support people who are using electricity to keep their rates low. We have $700 million in incentives and rebates to support people in being able to transition to and use electricity instead of higher carbon energy products. We are keen to grow our economy in a way that is sustainable and is producing the goods that the world needs in a low carbon way. One of our biggest projects right now is a transmission line to the northwest of the province that will feed 11 different mines in the northwest. We call it the Critical and Conservation Corridor. It's done in partnership with First Nations, and the work is about producing critical metals and minerals in a low carbon way. And our hope is that the world recognizes that through carbon border adjustment mechanisms, through the London Metals Exchange sustainability market that are setting up around low carbon metals, because right now it just goes into the market and we don't see that kind of advantage. But we are pressing ahead because we think that is where the world is going, and we're very excited about that. In short, it's hard to tell you all the amazing things that are happening in our province in just 5 minutes, but I hope you get a bit of a picture about where we're going. It's a great honor to be here with you, and I thank you all for your leadership and your work on this critically important issue to British Columbians and people in the world. It's time for all of us to double down on our work. Just because it gets more challenging doesn't mean it's any less important, and in fact, if anything, it's more important than ever. So thank you, and thanks for inviting me to be here with you today. Have a great day, and enjoy Climate Week.
Thank you, Premier Eby. Always great to hear from a leader so dedicated to making clean energy a huge part of their strategy to build a sustainable economy. Kudos to the Premier. We wish him much continued success. Building on that, I'm thrilled to turn to someone I've known for many years. Pedro Pizarro is the CEO of Edison International. We'll explore how utilities are aligning climate ambition with core business goals and what it takes to build clean energy systems that are firm, equitable, and investable. Pedro's been pushing beyond incremental change to deliver the infrastructure tomorrow's economy will rely on for a long time now. So let's get started. It's great to see you, Pedro. We go back a long way, and so this is great to see, again, what I would call a leader with a lot of vision. So Pedro, Edison International and the utility industry more broadly is having to adapt quickly to a changing world. what are some of the ways you see the business itself evolving to meet the moment? I know it's a really general question, but it's going to lay the framework for a lot that comes after.
Absolutely. Just, again, great being here with you, Bill. Very quickly, let me organize around climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, okay? On the mitigation side, we see that to get to net zero, the industry, and certainly our company, will have to invest across the whole suite of technologies, changing out the generation mix. Obviously more renewables. We need more clean, firm generation. We're excited about that. We need a strong grid to do all of that, right? So there's massive investment going into the grid to support the use of clean resources. And then to transmit all that power to all the places across the economy that will be electrified. So that all is in the bucket of climate change mitigation. Climate change adaptation, though, we unfortunately have had to be at the leading edge of investments for adaptation with the wildfire issues. And so in the last several years, we've invested billions of dollars around wildfire mitigation. And we're not done because we know that a certain level of climate change is already locked in. And so the whole economy will need to deal with not just wildfire risk, but sea level rise, extreme heat, floods, droughts. So there's an opportunity in all that, though, in defining the kinds of investments that are needed to keep our communities safe.
It's really interesting because I interviewed Senator Whitehouse last night. I think I told you it was one of the last interviews of the day. And he was talking about wildfires as well. He's from Rhode Island, but he understands how wildfires are related to the utility business. So this is something also that came up yesterday in a couple of different roundtables. It was such a big part of the discussion. It's about artificial intelligence. Yeah. Looking ahead just a few years, AI and data centers in the U.S. are expected to use more energy than aluminum, steel, cement, and chemicals combined. That's a staggering shift. How do you see utilities keeping up with that kind of demand while still moving toward cleaner power? This is the $64,000 question, by the way.
Maybe 64 million, I don't know. So look, the industry is really focused on this. We will get there. We will need literally all of the above in terms of resources. And so one of our big messages right now as we work with regulators, legislators, policymakers is, enabling access to every possible resource we can get because it's needed right now. We'd like to see, a lot of that be clean resources, but we also recognize that in the very near term, it does mean that we're going to see continued use of natural gas, even in my state of California. Even prior to the data center, headlines, you were already seeing the state doing things to maintain the existing fleet as a bridge, until we have more clean, firm resources. So that I think is a key message around that, and that opens up then the need for making sure we have appropriate siting and permitting reform to be able to develop resources quickly. Now, we might have some more about that. I will also say though, there's a lot of focus and headlines on data centers, but that's not all. Across the country, there's really three things driving this amazing load increases, first that we've seen since World War II. It is data centers, but it's also the re-onshoring of manufacturing. And then importantly, in our state, those first two aren't quite as big drivers as number three, which is electrification, right? Electric vehicles, seeing the early days of building electrification. So all of that is adding up to a whole lot of load growth. Now, talking about AI from the angle of the load it creates, but I'm also excited about the opportunities it creates to reform our business and use AI to run smarter.
We're going to talk about the opportunities in this next question, but there was a state senator from California yesterday who said 1 out of every 3 vehicles in California is an electric vehicle. So for a utility, that's like good news, right? Because it's added business, and if you electrify, beneficial electrification of everything winds up being a real opportunity.
So actually, it's good for customers because in California, we have decoupling, so we don't actually make money by selling electricity. We earn a return on the investments that we make. But importantly, as we make those investments, having more electric vehicles and other electric technologies means that there's more kilowatt hours going into the denominator, right? And so that actually helps to manage rates. If you can fill up the grid and use it more smartly and get more capacity utilization out of it, as you have more flexible demand like EVs, that's really good for the consumer and keeping rate increases down.
I think that's a great point. When you think about the future of energy, what are the technologies that really excite you? This is about opportunities. The ones you think could fundamentally change how power gets generated and delivered to people.
Okay, so let's go across the value chain really quickly. Start with generation, clean, firm generation resources, right? And so we've been excited about solar and wind and geothermal, et cetera, but now the next generation, advanced geothermal, like the contract that SCE did with Fervo, as an example, that use horizontal drilling techniques to access, more geothermal resources. Small modular reactors, potentially gas with carbon capture sequestration, all of these. And we need basically all of the above around that. That's generation. The grid side, technologies to improve the efficiency and the access of the grid. And so everything from advanced conductors that allow us to carry much more current in a given existing path, right? So we see a lot of building needed. We see that load in California could be as much as double what it is today by 2045. We're going to need something like 20,000 more miles of transmission. So if we can carry more power over a mile of transmission, that's really good. Compact substations, solid state transformers, that's all really exciting. Down at the end user level, vehicle to grid technologies. For example, SCE announced a partnership recently with Honda, American Honda, to demonstrate more of that. And then AI. Our company won EEI's, our industry's highest award this year for innovation.
Oh, wow.
For an AI device that basically is fusing data from multiple sensors across the distribution grid to both predict where we're going to have faults and locate faults where we have them. It's kind of like your Apple Watch telling you got to drink more water or watch out, you're going to have a heart attack. So it's that same sort of use of AI.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Don't have a heart attack.
So we're gonna kind of go back up to 35,000 feet.
Yeah.
With all these innovations, the clean energy transition is not easy.
Yeah.
From where you sit, what do you feel are the toughest challenges in balancing climate ambition with business goals? And how do you think we get past those challenges?
I'll give you two. Siting and permitting. We need reform at the federal, state, local levels. And I'm encouraged about the current administration and Congress. There's a lot of focus on that. So I'm hopeful, optimistic that we can get some real reform, both through executive actions, areas. I know Secretary Burgum has been very clear about wanting to see improvements of the Department of Interior, for example. You're seeing a lot in Congress around after they get through the budget, that little stumbling block. But after you get to the budget, it sounds like siting and permitting reform is one of the big things on site for legislation. And so eliminating duplicative processes, having appeals processes that have a time horizon to them, they'll go forever, and having the right resources for staff. Second challenge that I'll bring up, though, is there's so much focus on affordability appropriately, right? And I think for policymakers, there's a real struggle and tension between understanding that investments need to be made today that may have a cost, but that will open up the opportunity for the long term. And I'll close with this, Bill. When we talk about the clean energy transition, I know there's a lot of focus on climate, appropriately on net zero. That's great, that's why we're doing this, but it's not the only reason why we're doing this. Our analysis for California, and I think other analyses nationally have shown the same, the pathway with using clean electricity to electrify a lot of the economy, you're replacing less efficient car engines with more efficient motors. You're less efficient gas water heaters with more efficient heat pumps. That efficiency pickup, we believe, will drive a 40% reduction in the total cost of energy for the average consumer by 2045. And said another way, today, the average consumer in our territory spends 7% of their household income on their total energy bill, electric plus gas plus gasoline. We think that'll be 3% in 2045.
So that feels to me, I agree on the siting reform, absolutely, and Senator Whitehouse is working, he's the ranking member of EPW, Environment and Public Works, and then the chair, the ranking member, and then ranking member and chair in energy, they're all working together, four of them, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans on permitting reform. I think they're going to get this done. But the other thing you mentioned, the second, really about the opportunity for affordability and the message around that, we just need to communicate that better. I think there's a communication gap in the ability to say, oh, the future is clean, but it's also affordable.
More affordable.
And here are the investments we make now for a much more efficient and affordable future.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And we put out some white papers out there, but we need the help and spread the word.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
I
Bill.
appreciate it.
Always great seeing you.
Give him a hand. you see why I think he's such a gifted leader in the industry. He's really fairly amazing. So thanks, Pedro. Next, we turn to a question on every corporate boardroom table. Can we get going by driving green growth? To explore this, please join me in welcoming the Honourable Mike Rann, the former Premier of South Australia, Chair of the UK Board of Climate Group, and my friend and peer who will moderate the next panel. Have corporates converted green into growth? Mike? Yeah, I think so. We'll ask her.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to, first of all, thank you for being here. And I wanted to also say what terrific that this year is, despite choppy waters, basically the biggest climate week that we've ever had. And I think that is very, very important to register. And it was great yesterday that Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, talked about how the EU is going to stay the course. Today, we want to talk about have corporates converted green into growth? And I guess one of the messages that I've received at this conference so far, in a number of sessions, and also kind of off-the-record chats with people, is that they've said to me, we need to sort of change the narrative a bit, be less evangelical, but at the same time about saving the planet, even though that's clearly what we want to do. But also, and this is coming from business, we need to be much better at explaining that decarbonisation is good for business, that climate action is good for profits. And I think that the people that I spoke with yesterday are right in saying that we haven't really done that as well as we've done other things. And it reminded me of a time when I was Premier of South Australia, and just after that I was appointed to head up the federal government's Green Bank, and we gave loans to people to decarbonise. It was all about boilers and lifts and refrigeration. It wasn't sexy, there weren't shiny things to open in the desert, but it was incredibly important. And I said to all of our people, don't go out and say, come and save the planet. Go out and say to the prospective clients, here's an opportunity for you to save money and do the right thing. And people were saving huge amounts of money just on things like boilers and lifts. So I want to thank my friend Bill Ritter for his kind introduction. So I'm leading the discussion today on whether going green actually does pay off for business. And I'll be joined by three fantastic speakers, several of whom I've appeared with before. It's kind of like summer repeats in autumn. And representing the managing consulting world, global standard setting into a global corporate to explore whether the clean energy economy is creating a real competitive advantage. So we want to hear what's working, what's not working, what policy and market shifts are needed to maximise return on investment on faster climate action. So please join me in welcoming my panellists, Margaret Kim, who is the CEO of the Gold Standard Foundation, Nancy Mann, who's Chief Sustainability Officer at the Estee Lauder Companies, and Diego Ibarra, Senior Partner at Roland Berger. So kick off with you, Diego. Companies today are operating in a turbulent economy. There's tariffs, ever-changing, low growth, rising taxes, tighter public spending, in some places higher inflation. Given all these pressures, how are green initiatives shaping the way that businesses plan strategy, compete, or think about resilience?
Thank you, Mike. And first, thank you for having me, and it's great to see some familiar faces. I think we're seeing a couple of different dynamics as a result of businesses being more diligent and more exhaustive in the way they carry out their business strategic planning processes, especially around green initiatives. we see basically two groups of green initiatives. Those that always made commercial sense, where the business case is well understood, where the risks are well understood, and where they had the partnerships to deliver. We're seeing that those are continuing to move forward. In fact, many of those are even accelerating. And let me give you maybe one or two examples really quickly. On the energy efficiency world and the distributed energy resources world, those solutions that were helping to reduce the load, as you said, help them reduce the total cost of ownership of assets and contribute to building more resilient systems, are really facing double-digit growth in the last few years. And we're seeing that in those specific markets, the market leaders that are repositioning their value props around sustainability are significantly outpacing their peers. Another example could be low-carbon fuels, dropping fuels, like RNG or biomethane or SAF, where the business case is being driven by a combination of international mandates and some very strong voluntary commitments. On the other hand, we see those green initiatives that had higher risk profiles, those that either were depending on a technology that was not proven at scale, or they were trying to build both the supply and the demand side at the same time, or they had an infrastructure gap in the value chain that was not easily covered by a partnership. Those are being phased out, losing momentum, because they'll perceive what we call project-on-project risk. That was too much risk for the off-takers or the financiers to accept. So I guess the bottom line here is we're seeing that companies are continuing to invest. However, it's a reshuffling of the priorities, reshuffling of the portfolios to invest in those things that have a clear business case, well-understood risks, and more that backing up those solutions that are aiming at increasing the top line rather than just trying to de-risk and saving costs.
Thank you, Diego. Nancy, Estee Lauder is, I think, rightly recognised internationally as a company where sustainability touches everything from product design to your global operations. Where has it forced trade-offs and where has it opened unexpected opportunities? Are there a couple of examples you could give us?
Absolutely. So first of all, great to see you. I feel like it's same time next year, Mike. You're such a great moderator. And thanks to the Climate Group for having us. And I'm glad you recognize the Estee Lauder program. There's a group of practitioners here whose shoulders I stand on. So thanks to all you all. Just building off Diego's comments, I think we're in an exciting time where we are really, because there's been slowing growth, a real focus on how does all this work show up in the business and how does it drive value in the business. So in terms of unexpected trade-offs, I think generally what we've tried to do is shorten our supply chains. So 75% of what we sell in the US, we actually make in Long Island. And so a lot of what we tried to focus on in terms of not having trade-offs, but basically double wins. So obviously lower cost. If you go from planes to boats, it's a lower cost and you cut your emissions. Where the trade-offs are sometimes is when we basically need to take a step back and let the commercial leaders decide, no, in this instance, we should put it on a plane instead of on boats for various reasons. We've also found generally, though, that there was a trade-off notion that started in luxury, which is that luxury consumers are going to hate sustainable packaging. It's ugly, it's clunky, it's brown. And in fact, our packaging team has done a great job in creating actually an opportunity to create sustainable packaging that attracts consumers. And then lastly, we've spent a lot of time on our retail. We now have 95 sustainable stores. And although the notion would be sustainable store design is more expensive, and sometimes it is, so we don't go with it, but most of the times it's cost neutral or it's cheaper. And so I guess what I would love to see generally in the field of sustainability, particularly in luxury and consumer goods, is that we don't accept that it's a trade-off, is that we find the middle path and that we're able to translate it for consumers. And particularly in this time of lower economic growth, more and more, I think, practitioners like us have to be shoulder to shoulder with our business leaders. And basically at times make sacrifices on sustainability, but other times really lean in.
Thank you. Margaret, you work with a whole range of companies, hundreds of different companies, big, small, medium, across industries, all trying to do the right thing and the smart thing. What patterns stand out? And where are companies surprising you with creative approaches to sustainability?
Thank you for having me here. So in the recent years, we've definitely observed great efforts put by companies in trying to internally decarbonize. And we're seeing very obvious progress in that effort. However, it's no secret that actually where the science tells us we need to be versus what can be done on the ground actually today, there's a huge gap. And we're all collectively trying to find a path to bridge the two realities. And some of the innovation we're seeing, obviously the companies are trying to address within their value chain emissions using various environmental attribute certificates. And some are going beyond their responsibility to really contribute beyond their value chain and to take responsibility for ongoing emissions while also contributing beyond to community values and social impact. So we are seeing all of that. While it's challenging and there are a lot of shifting rules and goals, I think all the companies are trying to get on that journey. One of the innovative approaches I've been observing quite distinctively in the recent years is companies actually putting internal carbon fee. So not just as shadow pricing, but putting a fee, using that to really design their climate interventions and make investments, also to community-based projects as well as investing in technologies like the carbon removals to really bring down the cost curve. So we are seeing a lot of innovation. However, it is challenging. And what is the role of us as civil society, standard setters, and general public is to help that journey and be part of that journey to really see what the progress is instead of a snapshot of today's success or failure.
Yeah. So, Diego, back to you. Some firms can point to clear wins from sustainability. Others struggle to show real results, or they struggle to explain those results to investors or boards and so on. What separates the companies that seem to get it from those that are just going through the motions, like with a bit of greenwash attached?
So what we see is that companies that are successful are basically getting three things right. Number one, and to no surprise, is the business case, right? They have environmental sustainability is not enough. Solutions need to be economically sustainable. That means, at a minimum, a break even, and specifically, you need to achieve the weighted average cost of capital of that business in that market. Short of that, those initiatives will be short-lived, and despite the best management intentions, they will be under pressure. The second is we're seeing that successful companies have the right governance and leadership support all across the organization. 5-6 years ago, we always talked about it has to come from the top, right? It has to come from C-suite. Well, now that it's been a couple of years of just focusing on implementation, we realize that it's not enough. You need to have the buy-in from the P&L owners, of course, but also from the support functions and the operations. You need to involve early the people that need to make the change in the ground. And the business case really helps clarify and make sure that everybody is aligned to that value proposition early on. And the last one, and in my mind, the most important today, is partnerships. We see partnerships as the new leadership. Those companies that have acknowledged that no matter the size, the market share, no matter how vertically integrated they are, they won't be able to drive change by themselves or de-risk executions, and are willing to engage early in strategic partnerships to share the risk and reward. And let me give you one example. I think examples are always helpful. Here in the US, a global CPG company partnering with a global chemical company to de-risk the CapEx needed to get sustainable packaging and sustainable ingredients to a subset of their products. And the conversations around what are the new contracting requirements so that we can de-risk in terms of length of the contract and so on, so we can de-risk that CapEx, and also the reasonable mechanisms to share the rewards of a potential expected increase in market share of that subsegment of products. Those kind of strategic partnerships really are, if you ask me, the big differentiation of those companies that in this environment have been able to be successful.
Thanks. Nancy, with global operations, measuring impact can be extremely difficult. Where do you see the biggest blind spots, and how do you make sure the numbers actually reflect real change?
It's a great question. We actually, at our company, our new incredible CEO, Stéphane de La Favre, has really focused on KPIs. And so I think it is really pushing us individually to think about how do these, our corporate goals, sort of how do they apply to each individual staff person, and how can you measure that? In terms of overall, what we're trying to do is move from spend-based data to activity data. So for instance, on ingredients, which is a lot of our footprint, we've had now 6 actual imprint of over 600 ingredients, the carbon emissions. And so it allows our, when we use our green chemistry tool for our formulators, if we have 4 different silicones and one of them has a much higher carbon footprint, they can weigh that in the formulation in addition to cost and look and feel and things like that. So I would say that is the biggest piece that we're moving towards. Also, in terms of working with our suppliers, I mean, basically scope 3 is the big enchilada, I would say, in terms of climate. It takes up an enormous amount of our time. We have very successfully done a VPPA here in the U.S., and we've actually we've made in Oklahoma, we've made almost $5.5 million selling the green electricity into the grid. We are doing, just did a call for proposals in Europe for VPPA. But I would say generally, advertising is a big area. We've joined, to Diego's point around partnerships, we've joined Ad Net Zero. I think there's a lot of unknowns and need to work across industries on scope 3. And what we've really tried to do is absolutely get scopes 1 and 2 right. And when we've done offsets, we focus on offsets. We've been doing forest-based offsets. Because again, we have to think about how does this show up for the consumer, RECs and offsets. I mean, it gets very obscure, candidly. And so, forestry, people understand trees. People understand we're taking carbon that takes them out of the, but I would say generally scope 3, and how do we balance the investment of time into scope 3 with at the same time, candidly, trying to get 1 and 2 correct. And as climate practitioners, really integrate into the business to make those decisions happen. And just to give you an example, we have a new plant, for instance, in Japan, which is great because it shortens the supply chain, but that's a new plant that uses energy, that uses water. And so as the business grows, your strategies have to continue to change and grow around 1 and 2. And then, around scope 3, we're making best efforts. I think we're doing pretty well, but I do think that over the next 3 to 5 years, that is the big challenge. I've often said can we come up with like scope 2.5? Is there any way to kind of look like what is actually closest to the business? Because there are days when scope 3 just seems like inconquerable, honestly.
Several people talked about scope 2.5 yesterday.
There we go.
Okay, Margaret, across markets and sectors, how can companies work out which initiatives can help them achieve their sustainability goals, and most importantly, have a real impact on the planet and its people?
Maybe I'll continue on Nancy's point. I think the biggest challenge as well as the opportunity lies with scope 3. So obviously, first, companies need to define their responsibility across their value chain. And there are many sort of partnership, collective action partnerships and platforms that allow people to sort of dive into specific challenges of scope 3, like the AIM platform or the Value Change Initiative, and some of the signals that hopefully will be coming from SBTI and others. So I do think there are partnership platforms where companies can tap into to further understand, because these are common challenges. It's not just a silo challenge for one company, but across the board. So I think that's where the real opportunity lies. And it's not just about atmospheric carbon reduction or removal, but it's really about how to change that sustainable practice within that value chain, within that supply chain, to have better impact on people and nature. So I do look forward to those partnerships to come to fruition. And as Gold Standard, we have been actively engaging and leading in bringing civil society voice into that. But in order for all of this to succeed, I do really think we need to change the narrative. And we need to enable corporates to have that place, have that room to innovate, try, fail, and learn from it. As long as companies publicly disclose their journey, we should be able to embrace that failure. My Asian mother will be upset hearing this, but we need to move away from success and failure culture, pass or fail culture, because this journey is going to be constant failure to get to that final success and beyond. So for me, what is the role of civil society, standard setters, and general public to support that journey is going to be a key success factor in driving that change in scope 3, well, scope 1, 2, and 3, and beyond.
Can I, Mike, just piggyback? So,
Yeah, please do.
Great comments. Just to build off Maggie's comments, I do think that we were talking in the green room before coming on, that we really need to have open, honest conversations with the standard setters, because candidly, the standards keep changing. They're highly technical. If you're in a business where you have to go, I said, if I have to go one more time to my boss and say, well, the standard changed, and they're focusing on. So I do think we want to make sure as we move forward that we have closer partnerships, which we do with CDP, SBTI, but that we continue to talk about, okay, what are the standards? Is there a way to simplify the standards so that they are understandable to non-business practitioners, and candidly, that we're able to make progress on them and then translate that back? I mean, we were saying earlier, and I agree, that investors in particular, particularly European investors, very sophisticated understanding of climate. Otherwise, a lot of our stakeholders have a lower, but the team that does CDP rankings, SBTI, is the same team that is lowering our emissions. And my job is to get them out there lowering emissions and spending less time filling out forms.
Great. I mean, the next few questions really relate to regulatory environment policy changes. And one of the things I've been saying, we can be sometimes, well, all three of you work in the international areas. So it's not just what's happening in the United States, what's happening federally that might be opposed to regulatory environments or legislation at the state level, certainly in some states, but you've also got to deal with a whole range of different countries around the world. And it was interesting that in Australia, we've had climate wars for 20 years. Absolutely climate denial versus climate action. Something happened in May this year when the business community in Australia, the peak bodies for all of the businesses, including energy, including manufacturing, including the Business Council of Australia with the 100 top companies, the Farmers Federation, all came out and essentially said, enough's enough now. We've got to have some certainty rather than this kind of boom-bust swinging every which way. Well, so I guess in that context, I'd be interested to see whether there's any sort of movement, because it must be massively difficult for all three of you. But Diego, where do clients need to focus their efforts in this current uncertain policy environment? And what can make it easier for companies to treat sustainability as a growth driver rather than just seen as another cost?
Great question, and the key part there of that question is the growth, right? So you need to engage early with your customers, right? So we are in a globally divergent policy environment, and with different customer perceptions, you need to start that conversation early. We're seeing that in virtually every segment, there's a subsegment of that market that is willing to engage in value sustainability. So, start having that conversation, not to understand how your customers value sustainability. And by that, I don't mean picking up the phone and say, I have a green product, how much more are you willing to pay for it? It's more about, help me understand what are the sustainability attributes that you value and that your customers' customers will value. And with that, start building a green monetization strategy that needs to look both at the commercial side and your supply side to be able to understand what it would take to deliver those offers, those targeted offers. And we believe that the green products and offerings will be an when, not an if, in almost every sector. So this is what we say is a no regret move. is going to be a strong competitive move to retain your market share or even increase it, to increase your customer stickiness, and to, at the end of the day, strengthen your corporate, your core value proposition. So start having those conversations in the different geographies that you operate.
Great. Well, Nancy, when the rules and expectations around sustainability are constantly shifting, how do companies like yours decide where to place bets on innovation versus compliance?
Great question. We, for products, consumer goods, 80% of the environmental footprint of a product is determined in its creation. So we focus very early on in what's called the NPL, new product launch, and basically say to the brand, do you want this product to have a sustainable attribute? And if you do, then we work with them and say, this is what needs to be true in order for that to happen. So we place a big bet. The biggest bet is on our consumer. And so what we've done is through sustainable packaging, sustainable attributes, we've created a claims library with legal. We do enormous amounts of consumer insights. And what we have found more recently, we're a branded house. Our global brands are mostly headquartered here in the US, is that we really have to turn over a lot of the claims work to the regions. So a claim that's valuable to a consumer in Oklahoma is not a claim that's valuable to a consumer in Paris. The other piece that we found, we spent a lot of time putting basically education pages together on our brand sites. It's great. What we found with consumers, though, if it doesn't show up right away on the product page, it doesn't have as much value. So in terms of the bets, we always bet on the consumer. Otherwise, the compliance landscape is just constantly changing. Our general rule is sprints are expensive. And we're actually a smaller house than you think we might be. So we really do try and take the long view in terms of compliance. There are some front runners, California, Europe, previously the SEC, and we generally move towards compliance there. We spend a lot of time, again, looking for the double win. Where does compliance save money? Where does compliance add value for investors or for consumers? Because the bottom line is, if we just comply with a lot of regulations and we don't sell anything, we're out of business. Yeah. And so I think that's what makes these jobs interesting. And I think also is to have a bit of a backbone and a narrative. I spend a lot of time with investors, and I'll say, we missed XYZ goal, and this is why. It was cost. We felt that at that point, we should save the money and reinvest it in the business. So one thing I would say is, as you move forward as a company, is maintain your standards and narrative, and we've used our corporate goals to do that. But everything should be seen through the lens of the business.
Excellent. Now, final question, Margaret. So how can businesses work together or with policymakers to shape the rules so that sustainability becomes a default part of market success?
I think we've already seen and heard quite a lot of corporate level collaboration, co-working into, addressing some of these challenges in Scope 3, for example. I do think there's a huge role for policymakers in this collaboration, because if there is no incentive, there is no room for trial and error, we do need to remember, while the science says these targets need to be met, these are all voluntary. If we look at the COP30 prospects, the level of ambition on NDCs, it's not so optimistic. So if we're going to ask corporates to convert green into growth, we need to make sure that we can create that policy environment or incentive environment where corporates are willing to take that bet, have the backbone and have the narrative, and really proudly march through that journey. So I do plea for the policymakers to create that enabling environment through certain partnerships, through certain incentive policies, or through certain platforms where companies can try those innovations, work with others, and try to tackle this massive challenge ahead of us. But I'm hopeful that these voices will be heard through this week and the road to Belém.
Excellent. Well, can I just say thank you very much to Diego, to Nancy and Margaret.
Thank you, Mike. You were great.
Look forward to next year.
As always.
But I think it's been really helpful to hear and I really think it's interesting about, as you talk, betting on the customers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of you.
All of you.
Have
Thanks
those
very much.
conversations.
Thank you.
Please welcome Parliamentary Vice Minister at the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries of Japan, Sachiko Yamamoto.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Sachiko Yamamoto, Parliamentary Vice Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries of Japan. Today, I would like to present Japan's efforts regarding the climate change and food security which affect all of us. In my country, Japan, the average annual temperature has risen at a rate of 1.4 degrees Celsius per 100 years. And the year of 2024 was our hottest year ever. Same thing is happening all over the world. Not only are temperatures rising, but extreme weather such as droughts and torrential rains are occurring more frequently, and they pose a significant threat to food production. These two crises, climate change and food insecurity, are no longer separate. We must seek a way to resolve both of these issues. Agriculture is a main industry for food production, but let me look at some facts about agriculture and climate change. The FO sector, which is agriculture, forestry, and other land use, is responsible for 22% of global greenhouse gas emissions. On the other hand, the agri-food sector receives only 4% of total climate finance. 22% of the program, but just only 4% of the funding. The reason for this gap, I believe, lies in difficulty of implementing climate change measures in agriculture. Climate change countermeasures often conflict with productivity improvements. So, what should we do? Innovation. This is a key to solve the problem. In other words, it involves developing technologies just reduce GHG emissions while keeping or even increasing productivity. Fortunately, Japan has many such technological solutions. Let me share with you for just a few. The first one, this is alternate wetting and drying irrigation. This is water management technology for rice paddies that cuts methane while maintaining productivity and biodiversity. The second one, that one, high-performance biochar. This is with beneficial microorganisms. It stabilizes crop yields and improves soil quality while storing carbon from the air. The third one, biological nitrification inhibition enabled wheat, that one, which maintains yields while reducing nitrogen fertilizer use by 60% and cutting GHG emissions by about 25%. Regarding crop breeding, Japan definitely has advanced expertise in rice. And finally, that one, amino acid balanced feed, which helps reduce GHG emissions from livestock without reducing productivity. These are well-proven technologies, so we are ready to scale. In order to share the fruits of these innovations with the global community, we launched a new initiative called Midori Infinity this May. Midori means green or fresh in Japanese. It is a policy package supporting the overseas expansions of Japan's GHG emission reduction technologies in agriculture sector. This name symbolizes the unlimited potential of agriculture to contribute to both food security and net zero goals. It also stands for Initiative for Net Zero, compatible with food security through international expansion of Japan's innovative technology. This is our name. And we can not only contribute to global food security and decarbonization, but also create new business opportunities through international mechanisms, such as a joint crediting mechanism, which aligns with the Paris Agreement. Through Midori Infinity, we aim to expand our technologies globally, particularly to regions referred to as the Global South. To achieve this goal, it is necessary to cooperate with private sector and international organizations, such as the World Bank and the Green Climate Fund. Furthermore, localization of technology is also important. At COP30, we will continue to promote Midori Infinity as Japan's contribution on solving the global nexus of food climate. Because we believe that with the right technologies and international partnerships, we can advance food security and climate solutions together. Thank you very much for all your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Minister. It's an inspiring talk. Nature often gets left off the topics of discussion when we talk about the clean energy economy, but it's great to hear how Japan is working on making it bankable. It's exactly the kind of big picture thinking that we need at this time. Next up, we're moving into one of the most important conversations we'll have at Climate Week New York City, betting on a breakthrough. Where should the smart money go? Green investment is surging, but opportunities aren't evenly spread. Let's be honest, without money, we're not going to go very far. The challenge is figuring out how to back the breakthrough that really moves the needle. To help us figure this out and help us figure out what's happening in the world of climate investment is my incredible panel of experts. So I'm going to ask them to come in and join me, and I'll introduce them when they arrive. I'm really excited about this panel, and so to my immediate left is Patrick Herhold. He's Managing Director and Senior Partner at Boston Consulting Group. Next to Patrick, Priscilla Sims Brown, President and CEO of Amalgamated Bank. This is 2 years running where I've had the pleasure of interviewing Priscilla. Dr. John Kreitz, the CEO of RMI, or Rocky Mountain Institute, and Kate Gallego, the Mayor of Phoenix, Arizona. Mayor John, Priscilla, Patrick, thank you all for being here. We'll go right to it. So Patrick, I'm going to begin with you. Clean energy investment is accelerating, yet the flow of capital is still uneven. At a big picture level, what do you see as the defining forces shaping where the money goes and where it doesn't?
The key defining force is simply where's the money, where's the business case. That's at least what I see from work with institutional investors, with private equity players, with family offices, etc. The key question is, where is there a business case with reasonable risk on the technology side, on the regulatory side, etc. And currently, simplifying a little bit from a global perspective, that's indeed renewables, that's electric grids, that's charging infrastructure, that's electric vehicles as such. And it is less so low carbon hydrogen, it's less so in the rest of the molecules around bioenergy, including CCS, right? Not saying not on the project individual level there is no business case, but at a simplified level, everything that's electrified, we do tend to see a business case. For the molecule side, it's currently a bit difficult. If you zoom down to the project level, where there's an individual offtake, where there is a partner that provides a business case for any local requirement, it may happen, but globally, that's the simplified picture that we see.
And so you're officing out of Munich, right?
Yes.
And do you see this in different places around the world? Do you see like different circumstances impacted by national policy?
It does not even just national policy, it's also the regional ones, sometimes the local ones. Cities can make a big difference, right, in terms of what kinds of technology do they offtake, how do they accelerate or not permitting, etc. So yes, there is a big regional difference. But again, the global picture in terms of what's in the money, renewables, yes, and a few others, and some candidates, that's simplified, but still holds across the board.
It's a great segue for the next question, which goes to the mayor. Mayor Gallego, Phoenix, Arizona. Cities are where climate risks hit hardest. You know this as well as anybody, I suspect. But they're also where so much innovation starts, from transit to infrastructure. From your perspective, how can cities do more to shape where investment flows, and what doors does that open up?
It's a real point of pride for me that so many cities are exceeding their national governments in terms of achieving climate action goals. Many cities now are going directly to their voters for local funding. So in Phoenix, we have asked our voters to help us expand our bus and light rail system. They've given us that approval, as well as to make sure we're doing green buildings. So having that capital can really help drive the market. In our case, we are a hot desert city. We want to make sure there's more capital going towards water management. And so if we have local matches, that's helpful. Same with green buildings. We're even doing that with our public art. We have a wonderful partnership with Bloomberg Philanthropies that helps us do public art with shade. And that's created local innovation. We have companies that are coming up with coatings for public art or for roofs that can really reduce heat retention and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it makes for some pretty gorgeous public art. We're lucky to be a city named for a mythical bird that rose from the ashes. So beautiful public art, but at the same time, we're advancing technology and making sure we have green buildings with solar on top.
So you mentioned Mayor Bloomberg. Are you part of C40, the global organization that he has that has cities really focused on this as subnationals, helping nations meet their targets?
Yes, I'm proud to be the North American Vice Chair for C40, and that has been wonderful. Mayors are a little bit competitive with each other. So when I see other cities that are doing more to invest in their transit system or how many trees they're planting, that helps me up my ambition when we all come together, but also good ideas. Now we've seen a lot of new collaboration around AI and data centers. Phoenix is a huge hub for that, and we're going to need help from my fellow panelists on decarbonizing that industry, because right now it's heading more towards natural gas, but we'd really like to see the AI revolution driven by renewable energy. And as a hotspot for that technology, I'm trying to work with fellow mayors as far away as Australia on making sure we get it right the first time.
We had a panel yesterday on the Mississippi River, and it was fascinating. 2 mayors from different parts in Minnesota and in Arkansas talking about a coalition of 100 mayors along the Mississippi River who are working on sort of the impacts, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and it's mayors. So cities are such an important part of this. Well, thanks, Mayor. Priscilla, a lot of investors talk about impact, but capital markets often reward short-term returns over long-term resilience. From your seat, in socially responsible banking, how do you think finance can be rewired to back the transition in a way that's genuinely sustainable?
Look, I think we have to accelerate the pace of what we're already doing. I think, sure, there's new technology that's bringing lots of opportunities, but I also think we're not fully utilizing what's available to us today. For example, there's something called residential PACE, which not every city or state currently has.
Property Assessment Clean Energy.
Yes, that's right. It's Residential Property Assessed Clean Energy. Thank you. And the point of it is that it is a product that does not require for a homeowner, on the residential side, for the homeowner, you don't have to have a credit score, a good credit score. That's really important for low and moderate income communities, people that are really vulnerable to the effects of climate change and aren't able to do the things easily that others can do. This is a product that enables that. Now, in the beginning, it had a few consumer issues, and so now the consumer protections have been built in to avoid that. But I think the point of that, it's not a commercial for a particular product. The point is we have lots of tools. Those tools could be used with private and public partnerships, and those will then result in what you were describing earlier, which is the business case for companies to get involved, for financial institutions to provide sustainable financing.
It's interesting because when I was governor, I signed a PACE bill, I think maybe the first in the country, although Arnold Schwarzenegger always argued that he was the one who signed it first. We never arm wrestled over it, but anyway, the biggest barrier was Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, right? In order to get PACE going, they did not want to take a
priority position. Yeah, that's right.
To a PACE agreement, right?
Yeah.
And so it made it tough, but we worked that out, and industrial PACE has also taken off in a big way. And like you
That's
said,
right.
They're just tools, but they're really important tools.
That's right. That's right. Commercial PACE has taken off all over the country.
Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in what we can do for low and moderate income households.
That's great. Thanks, Priscilla. John, the energy transition is crowded with familiar bets: renewables, electric vehicles, storage. Some of the more controversial or less hyped options could end up mattering just as much. What are we overlooking right now that deserves a lot more attention from investors?
Yeah, I think what we're overlooking is that all of those different applications that you mentioned really rely on the grid right now, and the kind of centrality that we have to upgrading and modernizing the grid couldn't be more important than ever. You know, we're electrifying, we have been electrifying at twice the rate of energy growth. We're going to go about 6 times the rate of energy growth and expect to double to triple the amount of electrons we're going to need to move around here over the next 20 to 30 years. That's fundamentally going to reshape how it is we relate to energy. And when we think about how the US got to where it is today, how we got cooling, how we get to a point where we are able to electrify and create clean mobility in cities, how we get to the point where we're able to support, kind of PACE-supported, kind of thermal systems within homes. That all is going to require us to really upgrade that system tremendously. And that means investing in energy efficiency. That means producing and supporting distributed resources and all the different things that we can do with batteries and rooftop solar and things like that. But that also means modernizing our grid through grid-enhancing technologies that allow us to essentially create a smart grid to flow all that power around more effectively. Our grid is something that we have literally paid trillions of dollars to create, one of the most sophisticated machines in the world. And right now it operates about 40% capacity, right? And that is something, it had to operate that way historically because those were the technologies we had in the 1950s. But folks, we have wholly different technologies available today and should be pushing to get a lot more out of that asset that we've already paid for, that is so central to modernization, to international competitiveness, and to, frankly, prosperity and affordability for everybody going forward.
So when Pedro Pizarro was on stage earlier, I asked him about sort of barriers, what kinds of things needed to happen in order to be able to have this energy transition be complete. He mentioned permitting reform as part of the barriers to building out transmission. So let's take permitting reform and say, yes, what else? What are the other barriers to doing what you just said we need to do as a nation?
Yeah, I think we need to support, again, more supply side or demand side resources, more programs to educate and ensure that folks have super efficient air conditioning in their homes, more programs to ensure that individuals are choosing the more efficient appliances that exist there, more incentives from an innovation perspective that allow us to use programmable thermostats or use deployable batteries that help us, again, use this asset that we have much more efficiently and in the process lower costs. And we've done this before. From about 1970 to roughly 2000, our electricity prices actually went down here in the United States on a real basis relative to the value that we got from them. In the last 20 years, it's gone the opposite direction. And we need to redesign and get smarter about how we invest and make sure that we're investing on the demand side at the same time that we invest on supply, to ensure that everyone can afford reasonably the energy that they're going to need as we step into this next, hopefully carbon-free economy.
think you need to educate public utility commissioners around the country about this, John, because technology is in one place. Utilities often say they're a little bit behind technology, but they're way ahead of their PUC or their Public Service Commission. And I think in Arizona, you might experience this as well, just knowing a little bit about the state. So I just think that's the right point, and how we get that message out about really the urgency around doing what you described. It's really important. So Priscilla, in a tougher macroeconomic environment, investors are under even more pressure to deliver near-term results. How do you reconcile with that long-term ambition needed to drive a lasting energy transition?
You know, I think it's really a myth when you think about the opportunities, the economic opportunities posed by clean energy. We think we're a great experiment sort of to prove that. Amalgamated Bank, right now, about 40% of our lending is in clean energy of some description. And our returns have been excellent. And we think that that's could be true for a number of financial institutions if they develop the expertise that we've taken the time to do. And there are many that have done so. We also think it's really important that you think about it not only in the broadest sense, but we believe you think about it from a mission perspective or values perspective as well. There's a real opportunity in vulnerable communities. There's a real opportunity to educate and provide lending and even smaller loans in places where you wouldn't typically think to go. Community banks have figured that out for a long time, but they don't have the expertise necessarily at the community and local level. We try to work with them and to support that. CDFIs are really important in this country. For
CDFI?
Communities, you're keeping me honest. Community financial institutions. These are smaller lending institutions, non-bank institutions that focus on communities. There are about 140 of them. There are about 45 minority depository, MDIs, minority depository institutions as well. These are people in the community that are really supporting the local economy and the local entrepreneur, and partnering with them, larger banks and medium-sized banks, partnering with those banks enables them to extend resilience to these vulnerable communities.
So that's such an important point. And I know that the Inflation Reduction Act had different kinds of tax credits available for people investing in what they called marginalized communities, or I think there's census tract communities. I forget exactly the language, but that kind of went away, right, with the Big Beautiful Bill. Do you have a mechanism for continuing to do that still has?
I'm glad you brought that up, because each one of those grants or loans had alongside them the expectation of private financing to marry with them, 10 to 1 in some cases. Well, there's no reason why that private financing shouldn't still happen, and there are a number of organizations working to make that happen across the country, large and small, rural and urban communities. There's opportunities as people got geared up to provide that private financing alongside GGR, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. They now are able to provide that. The numbers still work. They still hurdle even without the financial government guarantees.
That's great. And it's really important, because part of, I left office in 2011, but I would say in the intervening time running a public policy think tank, it was impressed upon me how many communities felt left behind by the energy transition. They thought it was for somebody else.
That's right.
And not for them. And that goes to the residential part of it, but even the industrial part of it. And they bore the burden of a lot of the externalities from polluting resources, but we're not getting benefit from the kind of transition that was happening in a lot of other places. So.
Yeah. Things as basic as heat pumps and solar panels, these communities don't have readily available, and that's why it's important to stand in the gap as financial institutions.
Yeah, it really is important when you think about an energy economy, to think about how you create an energy economy for all.
Yes.
Patrick, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I know it's not a scripted question for you, but I really want to get your impression about this. Is there a way to think about this globally, about impacted communities and a lot of places around the world that you guys bank or consult?
So what definitely has gained interest and relevance is working with local communities to get your business case going, right? Linking it to the earlier answer. Getting local communities push permitting, right? On the capability side, let's face it, a lot of the green energy technologies are not readily available at scale, right? But building locally with communities, with schools, universities, etc., and saying, let's first start a pilot, let's get acceptance, let's then scale this, etc. Let's bring the funding on board, let's work in local ecosystems, cities, communities. That certainly has gained relevance even for the big players that usually I tend to work with, where we say, how can we localize our energy transition agenda? And then it definitely plays at different levels, right? At international, global level, it is about considered regulatory engagement at the national level, but yes, even more so over the last years at the local level.
That's great, thanks. So Mayor, if the world is serious about the energy transition, policymakers like yourself and investors need to act in concert. Yet misalignment is everywhere. What bold steps do you think are needed to ensure policy drives real investment rather than leaving opportunities on the table?
I think if people take away one message from me here today, it's the focus on the AI transition and data centers really needs to be top of line. For us in Phoenix, we have a pretty advanced economy. If you flew here, you may have used a Honeywell airline engine to get the plane here. So many medical devices you might have made in Phoenix. We have a somewhat energy-intensive economy, but nothing has prepared us for what we're seeing from AI and from data centers. So if you take our utilities right now in our metro, the requests they have from data centers would require them to build 2 new versions of themselves. So keep all the energy we have and then 2 new versions because it's so intense, the demand. Now, all of those data centers won't get built, but it does really show the magnitude of the challenge we're facing. Our major utility dropped its commitment to remove coal from its system and is now making a huge investment in natural gas. A lot of that is driven by the demand from data centers. Overwhelmingly, we're seeing them go to natural gas. Maybe we'll have that permitting reform you've been talking about and see a more robust, diverse, low-carbon portfolio, but that is not where we are headed right now. Arizona is close to California. We are getting so many of the data centers for California and Washington-based companies. A few companies like Google are really bringing in new renewable energy to the market, but overwhelmingly we are seeing it be carbon-based, and that's a real challenge for those of us who worry about climate change. You know, I'm mayor of arguably the hottest big city in the United States. I sent my kid to school and he couldn't have recess the first week because it was 118 degrees and the slides were dangerous. That is happening right now today. Today, heat is taking too many people's lives, including in the United States of America, and yet we are seeing the biggest economic change of our lifetime be powered by fossil fuels when we know better.
Just to put an exclamation on that point you just made about a hot city, how many days over 110 degrees did Phoenix have last year? I don't know this year, but...
We had 3 months. It's right now, particularly people who are medically vulnerable, it is scary. And we're not cooling off at night. I'm trying to change that as much as possible, particularly with building materials, and RMI has been very helpful. Can we stop doing black asphalt that maintains the heat and use more reflective coatings? Same with our buildings. But the fact that people can't even cool off at night gets dangerous, and 110, after 110, we went to October with a 110-degree day.
Yeah. So Patrick, I think you wanted to comment on the data center point that the mayor was making.
Quick things. So certainly in at least the companies I work with, indeed physical impacts of climate change materializing has gained tremendous relevance over the last 2 or 3 years, right? Heat waves, droughts, floods, wildfires, storms, all those things, right? How do I make my operations, my supply chain, my customer offtake resilient? In that case, for a city, right? How do I keep my city livable? Certainly is a nonlinear growth in relevance, as we see. To the data center point, I think it's highly localized and de-averaged, right? Yes, we do see a lot of locations and cities where data centers can really multiply electricity demand. In the big scheme of things, depending on the scenarios you would look at, data centers are one driver of many that drive electricity demand. Electric vehicles, heat pumps, electrification industry, etc. John has mentioned, right, depending again which country, which location you look at, can double, triple electricity demand over the next years. The beautiful aspect about data centers that I think is having an impact on the climate debate is that most of those are operators who really put a heavy emphasis on green electricity, right? Gas-fired, potentially with carbon capture and storage, or a nuclear one, or as much as possible from renewable energy sources. That's at least what I see is a nice side effect of the AI and data revolution, that these things are built, creating demand for electricity, which in many cases needs to be green, where price isn't the most important driver as compared to other industries, right? And I think that that's a nice driver for the electricity revolution on the green side that we see.
Thank you. So John, beyond the immediate market bets, what's your vision for the energy transition in 2035? What role should financiers play in turning that vision into reality?
Yeah, we are poised at a moment where we do have cost-effective economic technologies that can be deployed at scale to make cities cooler and quieter, right? To ensure that we've got resources and fuels that are much lower carbon. I think to get there, it's a combination of deploying capital against things that are already cost-effective, things like solar and batteries, things like wind. Yes, maybe not here in the United States politically, but it does make sense in other parts of the world and could here economically as well. But then it's also about embracing innovation. And in Phoenix and other places, there are ways not just to use reflective coatings on rooftops, but to do some fancy physics and use emissive coatings on rooftops, which turn a roof into a non-mechanical air conditioner that actually takes and pushes away the heat that's inside the building and drops the temperature dramatically. Innovations like that, innovations like how exactly we move power around the grid and get 3 times as much power moving through the same rights of way. Ways that we can use industrial heat and store that and manage it like a thermal battery that are now cost effective today that we haven't deployed historically, but stand as big promising solutions where investors can look to help build, kind of the clean energy solutions that we need today that we'll be able to scale tomorrow. So we have a combination of off-the-shelf solutions today that we need to keep pumping some of that capital into as we really build out the infrastructure, but an innovation potential that is moving faster than it ever has, driven in part by some of the upside of AI at the same time that will help us solve some of the downside of AI that we see in terms of its additional but not overly forcing impact on the grid and energy supply.
So the final question, we have about 10 minutes left, and so I'm going to ask each of you this question. It's been a tough year for the energy transition. If you think about federal policy in the United States, that's probably maybe one of the bigger understatements I've ever made in my life. But let's just take it's a tough year. But in this audience, we have people who represent corporations. We have people representing international players, people from other parts of the world. The Vice Minister in Japan just spoke this morning about things happening in Japan. But we have players from all over the world. And then we have people representing subnationals, states and local governments. And, it feels to me like there's a great deal of energy still behind the energy transition. So I'm just going to ask you this question. And you all have different perspectives, so please come from your perspective. Are you optimistic about our ability to do this in spite of what's been kind of a tough year in the United States about the energy transition? If you look at the rest of the globe, you look at subnational players, you look at corporate players, you look at the NGO world. And Mayor, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to come this way.
I am very optimistic. The US election was about many things, but energy policy was not at the forefront locally throughout the country. Transportation initiatives that would help green transportation systems passed. Housing that would put green construction at the forefront, those passed. And so there is a lot of momentum at the local level. If you're a company, go look and see which communities are passing those and invest, or help the communities you're already in get the local funding source, because I do think so much of the innovation in the United States will come at the local level. Many communities applied for climate pollution reduction grants. We went through a process to look at what were the investments that would do the most to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those investment opportunities still exist, and so I'd encourage you to go look and see, can you partner with a local government or a state government. We have wonderful partnerships that are helping us achieve our goals. For example, P&G has a great presence in Phoenix. Your Metamucil might be from Phoenix, Arizona. Check it out. But P&G has a program where they're offsetting the water use from their operations. They've gone to us in our public housing and helped us find leaks and reduce them. So we have more efficient public housing. We don't have annoying noise from leaks, but more importantly, we're saving the water. They're able to achieve their goals. And it just feels like such a win-win. I'm a proud customer of Amalgamated because they go out and find these win-wins. It takes a little extra effort to do the research, but you develop deeper relationships. You see more smiling housing residents, and you get to tell kids like my son that we're paying attention to the fact that it's 118 degrees and recess is canceled, and that's not acceptable. We're going to do better.
Thanks, Mayor. John?
Yeah, well, you've had some international voices on stage. What I would remind us all to begin with is that 80% of the world is still moving incredibly fast on the energy transition. And that's, yes, China, where more than half of the new cars sold are EVs, and where they are literally this summer, we're putting in 3 gigawatts of solar every day. I don't know if you all know what a gigawatt is. That's like 3 nuclear power plants worth of solar that's going in the ground. India, though, this summer, they actually hit 50% of their grid capacity is renewable. Australia, 30% of the rooftops in Australia have solar on the roof right now. And I can go on from country to country, from Colombia to Egypt to kind of Morocco and others. We see a compelling movement forward globally. And I think here in the United States, we do have subnational leadership for sure. We do have the economics that are still being deployed at scale. And even here in the United States right now, you saw California and Texas have put in equal amounts of batteries, and neither are having blackouts right now because the logic makes sense there from an economics perspective. And I think when we kind of over-index on some of the political messages, we miss the economics of what's really happening in markets. And what we're seeing in markets is that there are a lot of benefits that we continue to harvest at the subnational level, at the community level, and at the individual level, that in the end, we should all feel much better about where we stand than perhaps the media make us believe.
That's great, John. Thanks. Priscilla, you've already made me feel hopeful.
I love
your
that.
prior comments, but can you expand on that if you want?
I'm absolutely optimistic, and I love the comments that have been made already by my client and John on the broader scale. And I would tell you that more importantly, we've recently released a survey we call Power On, and it's research from the experts in this field who are equally optimistic, cautiously optimistic. Obviously, we see setbacks. But it is encouraging that 6 out of the top 10 states right now investing in renewable energy are red states. There's a market force here, which over time, I believe, takes over. And yes, I am therefore extremely optimistic.
That's great. Patrick.
Yeah, I can only summarize. It's the economy, right? Globally, 55% of the emissions are already abatable, reducible with economic solutions, 10% more to come in the next few years. China, unlike 5 years ago, has made it a priority, a national strategic priority to lead in that, right? Purely for economic reasons, not for climate reasons. Same in Europe. It's a huge economic opportunity that is being pursued, that is being shaped. And when it comes to economy, I would also be optimistic that the US sooner or later then also rejoins that train.
So as a person who held political life and worked with governors and legislators, I think this is such an important point that can sometimes be missed, that you may not think about climate as an urgent thing like other people do. There is an economic case for this. There's a business case for doing this that we need to make sure is out there and is part of the lexicon all across the country and across the globe, because at the end of the day, the business case may be what convinces people to do this as much as anything else, but we need to do this. We need to really make sure this energy transition happens. I'm glad to have been joined by 4 hopeful, optimistic panelists today, so give them a hand. So we'll now take a short 30-minute break. Refreshments are available in the networking lounge. We'll reconvene in the thematic rooms for the next set of sessions at 10:30 sharp. Thank you all.